I'll apologize for two things before I forget. The first is rambling on and going all over the place this morning, but that was with an intention that if there's anyone new to the this whole premises of what the text is all about, to give some sort of background. Hopefully that has been somewhat useful.
Venerable, the Zoom people are shaking their head.
They're shaking their head.
They were very fine with.
I thought they're shaking their head. They can't hear me. Oh, okay. Well, second apology, I guess you wouldn't mind as well, is that there was meant to leave a break earlier, and then I just went on, and by the time the next break, by the time we came to finishing the break, it was nearly lunchtime. So I just apologize for that as well. But hopefully, we'll catch up with some of the things that I intended to cover at that time too. And so let's see. I don't want to make it clear in my mind. So we're starting at 1:30. We finish at 3:30. So in about 45 minutes to an hour, no, in about an hour and so, we'll have another break, which will lead us to 2:15 or 2:20. Okay. So let us just take a few moments just to reestablish our good intention or motivation that we did this morning. This is important for all of us, especially in my case as a presenter, because it can be, one can easily fall into a self-righteous mode as a presenter. So the motivation here is that may all of this be beneficial, starting with ourselves, to finding real meaning and purpose in one's life. And then as we discover more about ourselves and find more happiness and make more peace with ourselves, then may we then be able to genuinely be able to share that with others. But in order to be able to genuinely share others with others, we recognize that one of the key elements, is to have the wish to share with others, which can fall into the love and compassion. So that is essential. We have the basis of love and compassion, but then as equally important, if not more important, is the wisdom. It is not enough just to have the wish and the keen sort of inspiration and even maybe enthusiasm to share with others, but to know how much to share, when to share, the appropriateness of the time of sharing, the appropriateness of the material which is being shared. May we come to have the wisdom to know all of that as well. And then particularly tied with our topic this evening, this afternoon, that is the main theme of this text that we are covering: how to develop love and compassion to the optimalist state, which is called bodhicitta, and then along with that, the wisdom, how to cultivate that and how to combine that two together. So with that as a motivation, then we can now come back out of our short, brief motivation meditation. So let us now, I'll try to make an attempt to actually get into the text. Whether we have time to finish it all in detail or not is another thing, but at least let us begin to start it. So I think the premises which I was trying to establish this morning is that it seemed that all of us agreed, at least in motion, we agreed that yes, we want to have peace and happiness with ourselves, but it is not sufficient. It is not, well, just as we would want to be happy and peaceful ourselves, we would want others to also be happy and peaceful. And so therefore, when we might have all had that as a basis, even in our upbringing, we might have already been instilled with the values of kindness, being kind to others, being compassionate to others. That might have already been instilled, but here, now we're coming into a realm of where those premises, those bases that we have already seen values in and understood and felt the values of kindness, love, compassion, and of course, we've seen the values of wisdom. Of course, may begin as intelligence. We all know that we have to be intelligent in order to learn anything, but the word wisdom here has a bigger connotation. It has a bigger implication. It's not just intelligence, it's really understanding with experience, having a profound, deeper level of understanding that comes from experience. That is, and even with wisdom, of course, there's different levels, but it is going beyond just intellectual understanding, beyond the intellect, beyond the intelligence. So it's a more profound wisdom that is being presented here in the teachings. So I think I don't think I'd wasted, and I think people on Zoom at least agree that I was not wasting everyone's time by dwelling on about what is love and compassion and how does it differ with our ordinary perceptions of love and the difference between love and attachment. I think it's important to sort that out. If we feel, in order to be aspired or inspired to develop higher levels of love and compassion, we need to know, we need to understand and relate to what are the basics, the basics. So sometimes it's good to go back to the basics. We've got that, good. Unless, for those who are on Zoom wondering what's happening, apparently the battery just died on the microphone, so I'm using the smaller one here. So I'll just continue. Establishing a good foundation of our understanding to build up on, I think is very important. So that's why I took time this morning exploring, our understanding of what love means, compassion means, and then leading up to then what does love and compassion mean from the Buddhist context, and then how that love and compassion, which is explained in the Buddhist context, becomes the premises or the cause for bodhicitta. So, by the way, it is a normal phenomenon whenever there's a teaching taking place, whatever, there's always going to be small obstacles. That's clearing away the pathway for bigger things to unfold, apparently. So it's not it's part of the whole. And we're given small things to practice with before we can deal with bigger things. So, so now I'll come to slowly, having built on our basic understanding of what love is, the distinction between love and attachment, which is essentially really important to understand. Then what love means in a general sense, we more or less have our own understanding of what that is, but then to be very specific of what, not just the Eastern culture or Tibetans believe of love, but the Buddhist teachings, the Buddhist explanation of what love is. And that is, it's defined as the wish, the genuine altruistic wish for others to be happy. That is love. What is compassion? It is the genuine altruistic wish for others to be free from suffering. So that is what compassion is. So whenever you open a book or hear a teacher talk about love and compassion, even they may seem to use it in a general way, very casually like that, not with a definition, it's good if one is interested in Buddhism, one would have to immediately relate, oh, that's what love means. It means wishing others to be happy. Oh, compassion from the Buddhist teacher, what compassion means from when a Buddhist teacher mentions it, or when a Buddhist book mentions it, Dhamma text mentions it, it means wishing others to be free from suffering. Yeah. So, and we also have that as well. We all naturally have the wish for others to be happy. We also wish others to be free from suffering. We all have that. It's not something mystical. Well, one of the things I like to take some pride in myself is that I like to, as much as possible, demystify some of these teachings which are presented in a very traditional way, and some of the terms they use, some may seem very mystical, like karma, compassion, from the Buddhist point of view, and it may seem mystical, and especially bodhicitta. And then later we'll come into other practices such as tonglen, giving and taking practice. It may sound very mystical and mysterious initially, or too hard, but actually it is good to relate it to the practical approach where we have the basis of all of this, which may seem so grand and so mystical or grand or some unreachable. So love and compassion, we have, even the Buddhist definition of love and compassion, we have naturally, all of us have the wish for others to be happy. It's part of being human. It's, it's an inborn quality as humans. We wish others to be happy. It may begin with our immediate circle, in our immediate circle, but that is a start. We wish our partner, our children, our parents to be happy, and we wish them to be free from suffering. Very simple. But the love and compassion, which is needed as a prerequisite or as a cause that will lead up to developing bodhicitta, is then a more evolved. We are, from the basis of what we already have, we're starting to work on that, start to build and perfect it. Perfected meaning like making it better, maturing in our love. We all have the wish for others to be happy, but from the Buddhist context, let us then further develop it, further enrich our love. Let us enrich our wish for others to be happy. Let us enrich our natural feelings of wishing others to be free from suffering. Let us enrich that. Let us make it even more profound. And then if one wonders, how can one do that? Well, the Buddhist teachings then does prescribe this very systematic ways of doing that, leading up to then the immediate cause. And then the 7 cause and effect sequence of developing bodhicitta, as I mentioned earlier, the immediate cause before developing bodhicitta is the superior intention. The superior intention, again, this seemingly lofty big word, is basically the perfected state of love and compassion. When one's love, which is the wish for others happy, is developed to an extent where when it goes beyond just the wish, but actually one is now, it moves us. It moves us to take a personal responsibility for others' happiness. What can I do to make others happy? Of course, within one's capacity, we begin there. Within our capacity, what can I do to genuinely make others happy? What could I possibly do? I don't like others seeing suffering. I cannot bear the others' suffering. And that is the element, by the way, in the Buddhist word of compassion, is seeing others suffering and not being able to bear it. So when we're not able to bear others' suffering, initially it makes us feel uncomfortable. That's natural. We're human. When we see others suffering, it reminds us of our own suffering. We don't like to suffer. So that's why often we don't want to see others suffering, because it reminds us of our own suffering. And not being able to help others out of their suffering reminds ourselves of our own suffering, not being able to do anything about it, especially psychological suffering. Yeah? When one is suffering from any psychological condition, such as depression, PTSD, and any of the others, yeah, but the very basic symptom is that one feels incapable of doing something for oneself. So yes, but there is help. We get help. And just as we seek help and our help from others, when we are in a better state of mind ourselves, we then are capable through our capacity of helping others too. So therefore, it is something mysterious. The Buddhist teachings, when presented in a very traditional way, may sound mystical, mysterious, and something way beyond our capacity. But no, it's based on the very basic values we already have. So, therefore, the special intention, what is called special intention, is the perfected state of love and compassion, where one now is developed one state of mind, and this is all possible. One can develop those states of mind, and one reaches it. So in one's training of mind, one reaches a state. Apparently, I haven't reached it myself. Far from reaching it. I'm not even able to have compassion, real compassion for myself yet. But anyway, it's all related, right? So as we practice, apparently, developing love and compassion, By the way, before I forget, what is termed, it seems quite a new term in the English language, within the English Western society right now, of self-love, self-compassion. And people feel like, oh, in Buddhist circles, you don't talk about self-love and some compassion. Initially, I agreed. I thought, yeah, we don't talk about self. That sounds very self-oriented and whatever. But then I started to discover there is such a thing as self-compassion and self-love in Buddhism. Definitely, 100%. What is it called in the Buddhist teachings? It's called renunciation. One's love and compassion for oneself is so great that one is now determined to free oneself from not only the suffering, but on the very causes of suffering. When one is determined to free oneself from the very causes of suffering, all the afflictions, that is the highest form of compassion that one can have for oneself, which in Buddhist terms is called renunciation. Yeah. So renunciation is nothing but love and compassion focused on oneself. And that is where the Buddhist teachings say that we need to begin. We need to begin with renunciation. Before we can develop bodhicitta, this very high, grand, state of mind, altruistic state of mind, we have to develop renunciation first. And again, I know that renunciation, the word, has a Judeo-Christian connotation to it, which like, oh, that means I'm not allowed to eat this, I'm going to refrain from all, essential pleasures. No, renunciation means not renounce. I think the wrong take we take is when we hear about renunciation from the background that we have had these terms presented to us, it sounds as if we feel a little bit hesitant with the word renunciation, and anything remotely that we feel capable of practicing it, is we think that we have to renounce our happiness. Renunciation in the Buddhist teachings is not about renouncing happiness. It's about renouncing suffering. We're fed up with suffering, so we want to be free from it. So it's an aspiration to be free from all our suffering. But the reason we take a wrong turn, by the way, is because we associate, me included, of course, and associate happiness with our immediate self-gratifications. We think that is what happiness is. So we think that we have to renounce our, yes, as someone earlier shared in our group, we come to a point where we realize that, as much as pleasure we derive from eating, from shopping, whatever other addictions it may be, if we go beyond the immediate sort of like small pleasures we get, it can actually be very, very unpleasant. It can actually be detrimental to our well-being, especially as in a drug addict or psychological addictions can be detrimental. My anger, which I call a psychological addiction, was detrimental to my well-being. All it took to be angry is to be upset with my mom and have a confrontation with her for a few minutes, but that ruined my whole day. Of course, my mother is gracious enough to forgive me and allow me to come back and talk things over. If that was not possible, I'll be even more. I'll be remorse with guilt for if my mom decides to cut me off completely, for the rest of my life, I'll have to be living with guilt. Yeah. So I'm so fortunate and gracious that I have a mom who, allows me to be angry and upset because she says, be yourself. So, okay, sometimes being yourself means being my angry self. But then she allows my apology, accepts my apology, and we have to move on. So again, I'm going off a bit of a trend here, but it's all related. So really, renunciation, the special intention means that one has already developed profound love and compassion for oneself, thus developed renunciation, and moved on beyond oneself, and now focusing on others. One has taken care of oneself. It is based on that premises. It is based on the premises that one has already, to a certain degree, taken care of oneself, or understood what one needs for oneself. Based on that profound understanding of what one needs for one's true happiness, real happiness, and what it means to be rid of suffering. Normally, we try to get rid of suffering by getting rid of the symptoms of suffering. Yeah, but getting rid of the symptoms gives us some immediate relief. But unless we get rid of the cause of suffering, it's like a disease. Unless unless the tumor is taken out, it's going to start to grow. And you take medication, it subsides for a while, but then it's going to start grow and spread. So the very tumor, the very root of our suffering, which are the afflictions, have to be removed. And that part is dealt with the renunciation. So once we have a good understanding, a good grip on what that is all about, then we start to extend towards others, wishing others genuine happiness, and wishing others to be free from suffering, love and compassion. And then, as I mentioned earlier, when that is further developed, it becomes a superior intention, which is now I'm willing to take the responsibility myself. And taking the responsibility to free others from suffering and lead them to ultimate state of happiness, does that mean that one now doesn't have to work on oneself, that one is already enlightened? No, right? So one is not enlightened yet. One hasn't had that capacity yet. So ironically, when one genuinely wishes others to be happy, one needs to genuinely seek the ultimate means, ultimate state of happiness for oneself to be able to present it to others, to be able to help others to the full capacity. So therefore, when one acknowledges that, even if one would, so that what does it mean to take personal responsibility to free all beings from suffering and lead them to ultimate happiness? It means that one is now determined to do whatever it takes to follow the path that leads to this ultimate perfection, which is called enlightenment. And so the ultimate, so it is not as, so, when it's presented in a too rigid way, then it may seem like black and white. Oh, so that means I have to first achieve enlightenment. So I'm not going to bother helping others before I achieve enlightenment. It's easy to fall into that trap. No. The very causes to achieve enlightenment, after the superior intention is developed, and it is said that one's mind is now ripe and ready to develop bodhicitta any moment. What it takes for the next step from the superior intention to become bodhicitta is when one comes to a state where one is fully committed to help other beings to be happy in the greatest possible way, which means leading them to the ultimate state of happiness, enlightenment. And one is, ultimate state of happiness. First of all, let's stop there. Then one wishes to free them from all suffering and take upon the responsibility. But one comes to then acknowledge that I still don't have that capacity. I'm not so, I have, how could I possibly lead others to enlightenment or to the ultimate state of happiness when I haven't reached it myself? And so one one admits and fully recognizes that one's own limitations. And so therefore, the teaching then presents that the state where you have no limitations, where you are completely capable of fully benefiting other sentient beings, fully equipped, where you are spontaneously and effortlessly helping other beings to be happy and be free from suffering, is a state which is, when you can reach that state which is possible, that is called enlightenment, Buddhahood, becoming a Buddha. And so then the teachings then goes further, like, okay, so what are the causes and how does one get enlightened? So, okay, just to define what a bodhisattva means then, a bodhisattva is a person, an individual being, a man or a woman, any individual being who has developed that state of mind, the utmost altruistic state of mind called bodhicitta, or the awakening mind, aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Someone who actually has developed it spontaneously, where it becomes unceasing, and day and night, that is one's main now concern, one main, how should we say, the main preoccupation in one's mind is working towards enlightenment for the sake of all beings. When that has been developed, what is it called? Uncontrived bodhicitta. Right now, when we talk about generating a bodhicitta motivation, we have to put some effort. We have to actually think about the values of bodhicitta. We have to actually put some effort. We have to actually think, yes, for the sake of all sentient beings, I'm going to dedicate my merit. It takes some effort. So it's not it is contrived. It is not uncontrived. So bodhicitta means a state of mind where it is uncontrived, it's spontaneous. How is that developed? Through familiarity. There's no other way. by familiarizing ourselves with these positive attitudes again and again, again and again. First with love, first with renunciation, first with oneself, and developing it further with others. Yeah? Then once one has developed that true altruistic wish to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, bodhicitta, when that is actually developed, does that mean now, okay, now we can rest and now we can, the job's over? No, that's where the job begins as a bodhisattva. So what do the bodhisattvas engage in as a practice to achieve enlightenment, as a cause of enlightenment? Older students are already familiar with it. The 6 perfections. One has to further practice one's generosity. Not just generosity, but perfect one's generosity. We already are generous. It's something mystical again. We all have the capacity to be generous. We just need to perfect it a bit more. Much more. We all have ethics. We all have some moral conscience. But what we're doing, what the Buddhist teachings are prescribing as for practice of a bodhisattva, as a cause for enlightenment, is that we have to perfect that ethics further. We have to develop it even further. So then the second perfection is the perfection of ethics or morality. Generosity, morality, and then further developing it further, the third practice of the 6 perfections is the perfections of patience. Now, this is a big one. We might have some level of patience now, but as long as the situation is agreeable, the situation is not agreeable, we seem to lose it. Yeah? So is it possible to perfect one's patience? The definition of patience, by the way, since this is a very important point, practice, is for one's mind not to be disturbed in the event of adversities. For the mind not to be, for the feelings of retaliation to not even arise in the mind. So that is the perfected state of patience, where there's still going to be problems, one is still going to be affected by it, but one is not going to retaliate. One is not going to allow that to one's mind to become agitated. Yeah. So thus patience has to be perfected. The practice of the perfection of patience is the third one. Then comes joy, what is called, different translators of different terms, joyous effort. So it is enthusiasm or effort, but with a sense of joy. Where does it mean that it doesn't take any effort by default? It means it's a little bit arduous. It takes some work. So there's going to be effort. But how does effort become joyous effort? When one sees the value of what one is doing. People who climb Mount Everest, it's difficult. Their muscles scream. When they reach a certain altitude, the body is screaming for oxygen. And every step they take from when they reach a certain altitude is like really difficult. But they keep going to reach until they reach the summit. And what's keeping them going is that of course, joyous effort from the Buddhist context in the practice of the spiritual path is not the one that we use there, but for them, it is the joyous effort, that the joy in knowing that they're nearly there. They're only a few however meters away from the summit. So although each step is like agonizing and they're screaming just to head back, they pursue, they keep on going, knowing that the goal is in reach. So that effort they put in is with determination, with joy, with willingness. Joy or willingness, with a willingness to take on the hardships and difficulties, knowing that there's a good result, that there's a good outcome from it. So that is what joyous effort is to do. Joyous effort doesn't necessarily mean like having no difficulties at all, having only pure joy, especially in the beginning. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that one sees a purpose, and despite the difficulties, one pursues on, one continues on. So that's joyous effort. Practice of joyous effort, then practice of contemplation, or more concentration, developing one's concentration, which is so important. You need to be focused. When we set out to do, especially a difficult task, our concentration and focus is utmost importance. So to develop the perfection of concentration. Then finally, the perfection of wisdom. Yeah, perfection of wisdom. So these 6 perfections become the causes that as we progress along the path, as we perfect these perfections, to that extent, we begin to help others to greater and greater degree. Yeah, the more we develop our patience, the better we are equipped to be able to help others in whatever situation it may be. Yeah, so these practices are all means to then reach our ultimate potential of benefiting others. So when the six perfections, the perfection of the wisdom is perfected to the extent where one has now reached the ultimate wisdom of understanding ultimate reality, then that coupled with the bodhicitta becomes the means, the ways to finally reach that state of enlightenment. Using the term path and stages are all a conventional metaphor or ways to describe the procedure to go along. But sometimes we take it too literally. We think, oh, the paths, which are, you still kind of, when we talk about paths, we think it's something that we need to embark on somewhere out there. But you see, it's really just all happening in here. All the different paths, the stages, the practices are all happening right here. Initially, yes, we go and search. We search for teachers, gurus. We go to different, people from the east, west, go to the east, to make all of these journeys in search of enlightenment. But what they find is that enlightenment is right where enlightenment doesn't happen to someone else. It's not as if Westerners have to go to the east to become enlightened. No, enlightenment happens right here where we are. It's not somewhere out there. Yeah? Enlightenment, when enlightenment happens, it happens right where we are right now, right with the mind, the neurotic mind that I have right now, this very neurotic mind that I have, full of anger, pride, desires, and all of that. It is this very mind that I have, afflicted by all of these, when they're all stripped away, and when there's nothing left, and what is then the qualities of the seemingly almost like unseen qualities of love and compassion, very remotely buried somewhere under there, when they come up to the surface and are developed further and further, the complete developed state of love and compassion and the intelligence or wisdom, when that is perfected to the ultimate state, that is the state of enlightenment. That is the state of enlightenment. So it's something out there, nothing mystical. Enlightenment happens right within where we are, right where the mind, we don't have to change our mind. We don't have to change our body transforms, our mind transforms, but that's something else, it naturally transforms, So these are again on the premises of that. So therefore, now the more classical way to develop bodhicitta is said to be the 7 cause and effect sequence, but then there's the other cause and effect, the other technique called the exchanging self with other technique. And I noticed that His Holiness the Dalai Lama uses that technique more in a general setting. Why? Because the 7 cause and effect technique begins with having a recognition of all beings as being like one's mother, which is a big leap we have to take. The first leap we have to take is the acceptance that there has been past lives, there will be future lives. To even think of the possibility of all beings being one's mother, that's a big leap in itself for Western minds. But the next big hurdle for Western minds is that I have to go to treat all beings as my mother and love them as my mother, but I hardly love my own mother in this life. Yeah? I don't know if there's any Westerner who doesn't have issues with their parents. Am I the only one? So you see, that's why the exchanging self and other technique begins with just practically, logically. It's more logical, especially for logical-minded Western people. The exchanging self with other technique seems more logical because it begins with the premises of, just acknowledging to myself, do I want happiness? What is the answer? Yes. Do I want to be free of misery and sufferings? Simply yes. Well, do you suppose, we're asking this question to ourselves, oh, okay, I understand, I get it. You want to be happy, you want to be free of suffering. Do you suppose others also have that wish? Simply, it's yes, right? Just as I want to be happy and don't want to suffer in any way, so do others. Everyone has. We may have so many differences, conventional differences, cultural differences, psychological differences, different preferences, different languages, but all of that is all in the conventional realm. But one thing we all share as humans, even with animals, is that we all wish to be happy, do not wish to suffer. And that is, it's not something mystical again, it's just practical, it's just logical, it's just this, that's how it is, that's what it is. So the Mahayana teachings then as a training of a mind where we start to shift the focus just on oneself, to start to acknowledge there are others also who want to be happy. There are others also who don't want to suffer. Yeah. So using that as the premises, as the basis, then one further develops and cultivates one's wish to be happy and to be free from suffering, extending to others. One develops further, and whichever technique it is, that 7 cause and effect or the exchanging suffering with others, ultimately they come to the same practice of having to practice the 6 perfections. Whichever way you want to get around, use the technique, you have to come to the same point of having to practice the 6 perfections. That is the practice. Now, in the Tibetan tradition, it is a combination of both. Yeah, it's not preferred one over the other. The Tibetans immediately relate to the 7 cause and effect because now, I guess, even Tibetans would acknowledge that things have changed a lot from the more past times, but culturally, even to this day, but more so in the recent past, Tibetan mothers are known to be one of the most loving mothers. Tibetan mothers are the ones, like other Asian mothers, are the ones who hold their children soon after they're born very close to them, always carrying them in front of them or behind them. Westerners the medical profession in the West are appalled to hear that in the Tibetans or other Easterners sleep with their kids, with their infants. But it's a given, it's a norm in the East. So that bond with the mother and the child is very strongly placed right in the beginning. Soon after birth, the child is always with the mother, close. So the child grows up with that affection, with that love, with that nurturing of the mother constantly. So it's no qualm for an Eastern person who's grown up with that strong bond and affection from the mother to feel affectionate towards the mother. It's a given. Yeah. Just as the Western, particularly the medical profession, will be appalled to hear about the practices in the East, Easterners are appalled to hear that in the West, the child is put in a separate room in a small crib just by themselves. How dare the parents do that? How could they leave the child just by themselves in a crib by themselves and only attend when they're crying? Otherwise, they're left alone. One of the books I'm reading currently is called The Trauma of Every Day by author name, Mark Epstein, something like that. The trauma of everyday life. And he talks about it as a psychologist. He's a psychologist, a Buddhist psychologist. And he talks about how, yes, most of us are living trauma in our everyday life. We experience trauma from day one, soon after we were born. According to Buddhist teachings, even the birth was a traumatized experience. Birth was not a happy, joyous occasion. We were born crying, not smiling and laughing. Yeah? It was not an easy process. So from the day one, and soon, possibly before we were born, well, not possibly, according to Buddhist teachings, before we were born, we were confined into this space for 9 months. We were conscious then, we had a mind. Yeah, that was a traumatic experience. Birth itself was a traumatic experience. And then soon after birth, completely alienated, left alone, only attended to when we were crying. We needed affection, we needed love and affection, and when we were, at all times, really. So trauma is built up from that. No wonder. I'm not surprised that a Westerner, and me myself, I'm not ashamed of having issues with my mother. Yeah, I had my traumatic experience, but do I blame my mother for that? No, because, well, I say no here easily in front of you, but I should mean it. She had no choice. That was the norm. How many mothers are here in our audience? That's what you have done with your child. You yourselves would have been brought up in that way, right? It's practice, the norm practice. But is it the right practice? Would it have been better maybe to, have the more stronger affectionate bond with the child? Perhaps it would have been a healthier approach. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell too much on that. I know that will bring a lot of debate. I'm opening with cans of, what do you call the worms of cans? How do you pronounce it? Say it? Can of worms, yeah. Anyway, you get the point. So coming back to the point here, if so far things have made sense, and I would like to believe that it has made sense, regardless of my bambering around, if it makes sense that, yes, if there's such a thing, if one's mind, I'm not saying out there, me, you, all of us, if it is indeed possible for me to develop my mind, I do acknowledge that I have some love. I do wish others to be happy to a certain extent. I do some things to a certain extent to make others happy. And I do wish others to be free from suffering to a certain extent. And I have some capacity to a certain extent. But if it can be developed further, okay, I get it. I need to work on myself, yes. But is it either or? No. Apparently, the teachings are saying that as you work on yourself, you become more equipped to others. As you help others, you develop yourself more. So it's not one or the other. As we work on ourselves, we become more equipped to help others. And as we start helping others, we enrich ourselves more. So that's why His Holiness the Dalai Lama emphasizes, and the teachers from the past all emphasize, the best way to be happy is to genuinely work towards making others happy. Yeah, when you genuinely devote yourself to making other beings happy in whatever way it takes, that will, even if you don't wish to be happy, we cannot help it. We will be happy. Yeah, and we know that from small examples. When we genuinely give a small gift to others, and especially when it's appreciated with others, it makes us happy. So going further here, then, if it is possible, and okay, the Buddhist teachings seem to present, this incredible state of mind called bodhicitta, an altruistic state of mind. If that is indeed possible, am I inspired? Do I feel that I'd like to develop that? And if the answer is yes, then of course we would be willing to hear. We would be asking, well, what is preventing me? What is preventing me from having unbound love and compassion for other beings, others or other beings? And what is preventing me from feeling profound compassion for other beings? And why can't I even develop those causes for bodhicitta yet? So if one is genuinely interested then to develop that, one has to then hear the next part, which is the obstacles for developing. What are the main obstacles or hindering? What's in our way? We have the capacity, but something's in the way. What is in the way? So coming back to the Buddhist teachings, what is in the way? It's in Buddhism, it's coined, there's two main causes. Self-grasping and self-centeredness or self-cherishing. These are the two main obstacles. Now, just like with love and compassion, we all also have this little bit unfavorable quality, as according to Buddhist teachings, of self-cherishing. Now, again, the words can be misleading. I know that I can open a can of worms again by saying, oh, Buddhism says that self-cherishing is a vice. Should abandon self-cherishing. Oh, how can I take care of myself? Yeah. And I was thinking about this morning, and I think we can make a distinction even in the English language. What Buddhism is saying, then I could say that self-cherishing, when the Buddhist teachings talk that we need to overcome our self-cherishing, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't cherish ourselves. There's a distinction between self-cherishing and cherishing ourselves. That's the simple way I'll put it. But I heard His Holiness the Dalai Lama once correcting his own translator or interpreter, translator, saying, when the translator used self-cherishing, His Holiness said, perhaps use the word self-centeredness, because that is a more general term. Self-cherishing can bring up, discomfort in some people. So self-centeredness, that is something we can all relate to more easily. So for as long as we have an ego, there's bound to be some focus on the self, but the self-centeredness, which is prescribed here as an obstacle in the Buddhist teachings, is the exaggerated, that the completely mistrued self-centeredness, where the focus becomes really just oneself, even at the expense that one leaves out others, willingly leaves out others. Now, self-centeredness can be very much related to, and again, another state of mind, which would be commonly again accepted as selfishness. Now, again, here I'm trying to demystify these words, self-cherishing, self-centeredness. Let's come back to a more generic, common term, selfishness. Don't we, as even common people, haven't we been taught, and now that we have assessed the situation, don't we agree that being selfish is not really a desirable quality that we would like to keep? Parents very early on teach their children not to be very selfish, especially if they have a few children. Come on, share with your siblings. Don't be too selfish. So the idea of being less selfish as a virtue is not something so mystical and uncommon. It's something that we were instilled as young children. And it's to this day, even someone who doesn't believe in any religion, any God or any Buddha, whatever, if we ask them, if someone with some level of conscience, if you ask them, is it good to be selfish? Most likely, the answer would be, no, it's not good to be selfish. And if you further query saying, are you selfish? Most probably to defend oneself, one might say, no, I'm not really selfish. I share my things with others. I'm not a very selfish person. I like to believe that myself. But when these teachings are presented, I must say, I'm brought to the awareness that selfishness is a very common term and a very general level that we all accept as being a virtue, and because there's degrees of it. But the degree that the Buddhist teachings bring what selfishness can become is a much higher level. So selfishness can reach a state where, when we go deeper into the levels of selfishness, there can be a state which is called, in Buddhist terms, self-centeredness, where I'm not a selfish person. I like to share with others for as long as it is comfortable for me, for as long as I have, it is agreeable when the other person is agreeable to me. So it is conditional selflessness that we practice in a normal world. The Buddhist teachings say that for as long as we live in the delusion that it's okay to be mildly selfless, but to still hold on to our self-interests to a greater degree, then that is an obstacle. So as a prerequisite to developing bodhicitta, it is said that we need to strip away the focus on the self, beginning from the very crude levels of selfishness that even common people, everyone would agree as being selfish. From that very basic levels of selfishness, slowly working your way up where the main concern so from the Buddhist point of view, self-centeredness is very much tied in with what is called the self-grasping mind. It's very much related to the self-grasping mind. Because the self-grasping mind, okay, so now here we have to spend some time, what does self-grasping mean? So self-grasping, as distinct from self-centeredness or related to self-centeredness, I would say that self-centeredness arises from self-grasping. The self-grasping mind is one where one holds a very strong hold onto this self, this sense of self, me, the sense of me, the self-identity. It is based on a misconception of who we are to begin with. Based on a misconception of who we are, who I am, I develop from that basic misconception of what I think I am, I develop that already is a ignorance. The misconception I have of who I am is based on ignorance. From that ignorance, I develop a further ignorance of, based on the misconception of who I am, I develop a strong grasping to the self. Grasping. And that strong grasping produces a sense of what in English terms called is like a natural sense of I am the center of the universe. Yeah? We may not go around announcing that, but in the way that we conduct ourselves, the way that on our everyday lives, we actually, if we truly examine ourselves, and I'm speaking about me here, when I truly examine my own mind, I'm appalled to how much of my day is oriented and focused around me. I'm being bluntly honest here, thanks to the teachings. You know, my so-called love is all about me. You know, as soon as I wake up in the morning, it's like, well, I need my coffee or I need my tea. What I need to do next. And it's all about my job, my career, my education. We even say my wife or my husband is all related to me. Yeah? My children, still me. Everything's related to me. Yeah? So that sense of me, what kind of sense do we have? You know, like, I'm far from developing bodhicitta because 24 hours of the day, only when I feel like, okay, it's practice time, I try my very, most times I fail, but I try and that's why His Holiness the Dalai Lama mentions, he made us make a promise. He gave an oral transmission of a practice called the all-encompassing bodhicitta mind, which is a practice where you combine both conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. You do a visualization where you're combining the both. So in that, when he presented that was during the pandemic, and I was during crisis, we become so, you know, we're hungry for the Dharma again. So I was listening to every teaching His Holiness was giving online, you know. So he gave this teaching, this all transmission and teaching of this practice called the all-encompassing yoga mind. And he made us promise, those who are listening to him and those he considers his disciples, which I am one of them, hopefully. He made us promise, please do this meditation every day. Every day. And it says, even with effort, even if it takes effort for you to do it, please do it. So my assumption that I'm going to do practice only when I feel like it, my thing like, oh yes, I like to do practice, but it should be genuine. So therefore I'll do it only when I feel like it. That excuse went way out of the window. Now I feel like I do respect the Dalai Lama enough to make that promise and keep that promise. So every morning it takes me so I'll just share with you, because it's so difficult to generate, even as a motivation, the bodhicitta motivation, it's so difficult. Perhaps because I have the symptoms of depression, and one of the symptoms of depression is being completely immersed in oneself. And it's interesting, the more one is immersed in oneself, the darker it becomes. The spiral becomes even further down. Yeah. So part of the symptoms then of having depression is being so immersed in myself that because of that, it's just so hard to get out of it. And so therefore, later I'm going to share, about the Tonglen practice being very helpful for me if I have enough time to share that. But here I thought it's so difficult to generate even the motivation. And so how am I able to keep the promise of the Dalai Lama in trying to generate a bodhicitta motivation every morning? And not only bodhicitta, but what is more obscure and difficult is the notion of emptiness. You know, that seems, if anything is mystical, it seems that emptiness is the most mystical thing. You know? How do I do that? So the resolve I have for myself is by listening to his 10 minutes transmission of that teaching, of that all transmission of the all-encompassing mind. Every morning, I just play the recorder, and that's the best I can do. I just listen to him. And I just imagining what he says is happening. Sometimes I doze off a bit, but 10 minutes, I just listen to him. And right now, that's all I can do. And he said, if it takes effort, just put effort in, put effort. The amount of effort I can muster up right now is just listen to him every morning for 10 minutes and just imagine. You know, I like the word in English with some of these phrases are useful. Fake it until you make it. There's no other choice for me. I have to fake it every morning. Yeah? But as a promise to the Dalai Lama, he said it's okay. If it takes effort, even if you fake it, fake it. So all the things we have to fake, the best thing we have to fake is perhaps trying to generate a bodhicitta motivation. Yeah? It takes effort, we put effort in it, and apparently, as the teachers say, by putting effort into it, it will start to become more natural, become more spontaneous. When will that day occur? I don't know. For me, might be lifetimes. But for all I know, maybe this is the first time I'm starting. You know, the Chinese expression, every step. No, sorry. 1,000-mile journey begins with the first step. Have you heard it? Yeah. That's a famous phrase. 1,000-mile journey begins with the first step. For me, so when I take that into my situation, for me, the first step is trying to put this in practice. It's so hard and so difficult. As a Buddhist was brought up, you know, with the notion of past lives and future lives, I must say, I do have a belief. I'm not 100% convinced, but I maybe 89, 99, 98, 99 convinced that there is past life and future lives. So perhaps for all I know, my first step would be this whole life. You know, this whole life might be my first step. So be it. It's okay. If there's going to be future life, there'll be future steps I can take. So that is how I try to, you know, resolve with myself. Besides, I'll share here a very inspiring interview with a prominent master, late master, Buddhist master by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm sure everyone would have also heard of him. This was an interview with Oprah Winfrey. I think it's over 50, 60 minutes, quite a long interview. Of course, I failed to remember much of the interview at all, but one thing that stuck with me and I'll never forget, I shall not forget, is when Thich Nhat Hanh was asked that question by Oprah Winfrey. He would have been in his 80s then, some late 80s. At your age, she asks, you have many centers, you travel around the world, you're constantly doing things. What keeps you motivated? How do you keep going? And his spontaneous, natural answer was, by maintaining a beginner's mind. Here I was with all my pride thinking, I've learned a lot, I have to be quite much more advanced that you know, and I should be much more advanced. And here a great master is saying the way that what motivates him is maintaining a beginner's mind. Wow, okay. Who am I to think that I should be very advanced when a great master is saying that? Of course, there's much more profound, much more levels of profundity in what he was explaining, but it gave me the profession to be a beginner again. And I like to consider myself, and I'm going to consider myself now, with the permission of Thich Nhat Hanh, to be a beginner. But I found out more about what he was saying. This might be an experience that some of you might relate to. And as having lived in the Buddhist centers for the last 25 years, I've seen it happen again and again. Initially, when someone first meets the Buddhist teachings, they're all enthusiastic. They're all with zest. Yes, I want more. They come to every teaching. They try to do every practice. That's a beginner's mind, enthusiasm. After a while, I've heard that. I've read that. I've done that practice. I want more. I want to become enlightened now, but that's not happening. If that's not happening, I might as well just give up. And some people have given up. Many have given up because they've lost the beginner's mind. So the beginner's mind, the mind of enthusiasm, the mind of freshness, the mind of eagerness, the mind of seeing every opportunity to practice. Understanding and reminding oneself that even the hardships are part of the practice. That's a beginner's mind, yeah? So that's what I took from that interview, is that, you know, great master is saying that what motivates them is a beginner's mind. And there's so much, we forget that. We want to go beyond. We want to reach more. We want to go higher levels. We want to get more profound teachings. Yeah. I used to be ashamed to be a beginner. Now I'm kind of like feeling a little proud. But then that's another thing I have to work on too, right? Self-righteousness. Now I'm self-righteous as I'm a beginner. The trappings of the ego. Coming back again to the point here, the two main obstacles for developing bodhicitta. And here I'll bring in both bodhicittas, conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. The two main obstacles: self-centeredness and self-grasping. The antidote for self-centeredness, conventional bodhicitta. The more we understand what conventional bodhicitta is, the more we work towards developing conventional bodhicitta, the lesser the self-centeredness becomes. And also, vice versa, the lesser the intensity and strength of the self-centeredness, the more the willingness, the openness to bring others into the other equation. It's from being it's all about me, the extreme of level of self-centeredness. When I started to discover of self-centeredness within myself, I really started, and when I started hearing about, because I'm interested in psychology, when I heard these terms of how one of the neuroses, one of the psychological states, which is of derailed psychological states of being in psychology, is called, it's related to narcissism. Yeah, an extreme form of narcissism can be a psychological condition. One of the first questions I had to my therapist was, I have the fear that I'm a narcissist. And I really meant it. I really felt like I'm a narcissist. And my therapist luckily gave me some relief, says, a narcissist wouldn't even be able to ask that question, even would reflect that way. A true narcissist wouldn't even be able to question that whether they are a narcissist or not. So there was a little bit of relief, but that didn't relieve me from my self-centeredness. No question, I don't have to ask a therapist about my self-centeredness. I know I have self-centeredness. I know with 100%. That's one thing I know, at least, that I do have so strong self-centeredness. And that I know now that it is because of my strong selflessness, centeredness, that prevents me from developing more altruistic states of mind. And I might also add here, lest I forget, lest I run out of time, is that I started to discover for myself, and this is all a personal journey. So please don't relate that I'm trying to bring this upon anyone else who have similar conditions. It's not about you, okay? It is about me. I'm going to be completely selfish here. What I'm about to say is that I started to notice that my depression, at the root of the cause of my depression, was a very strong sense of self-centeredness. And the stronger I had my self-centeredness, the days I had stronger self-centeredness, the worse my symptoms of depression became. So thus, no wonder when I took interest in the practice of what is called giving and taking, tongnen, which is about taking in the suffering of others, giving them the happiness. When you have very strong self-centeredness, to do it in a proper way is out of the question. So I had to fake it again. Every morning I'd be waking up with a pang in my chest, literally feeling like there's a lump in my chest here. And this heaviness of that weight of that lump in my chest kind of prevented me from even getting out of bed. And I would think, well, I might as maybe stay in bed all day long. Well, of course, that's not practical. I have to continue with my life. So how do I, very uncomfortable, this chest block here, this heavy thing. One of the techniques, there's different ways of how this meditation is done, the taking and giving meditation. One one of the techniques specifically mentions, you take in the suffering of other beings, you imagine in a black smoke, and it comes to the center of your chest or heart. And in the center of your chest or heart, you imagine this black lump, which represents your self-centeredness. And that smoke that you bring in completely dissolves and destroys that sense of self-centeredness. And then you are equipped then to give out a sense of happiness and joy to others. So lying in bed where I'm not able to move with this big hang in my chest, lying there, I'll think, okay, I'll just imagine doing this time prolonged practice. I've heard so much about it. I've been inspired to do it. So let me just fake it here. And lo and behold, I'm not kidding, just even imagining taking in the suffering of others. And I thought, do I have to imagine other beings suffering? And I played with this is where the Buddhist teachings are, the conventional teachings are so great. They help you to, we already have imaginative mind. We have a very busy mind. So it's harnessing that quality of imagination to go further, use it in a positive way. So I thought, am I just imagining? Isn't that real that other beings are suffering? Unfortunately, no, it is true. There are so many other beings who have much worse conditions. Even in depression, there's many others who are suffering much greater than the state I'm in. So, okay, let me just imagine I'm taking in their suffering. I'm not kidding. Every time I do it, even imagining to do it, it's suddenly that big knot that I felt earlier, that lump, started to loosen out. I feel like much lighter. I'm able to get out of bed. And of course, I get out of bed and all that, then I forget about all suffering other beings and everything, and I just go back to, I need my coffee now and everything. But at least I could see that, I could see the correlationship between if my depression, as I thought it was, caused by my self-centeredness, it seems that it is then true that when I do a practice, even with some imagination and even if I'm trying to fake it, just by even pretending to do this practice, it does make me lighter. So it seems that this is perhaps true, that the reason why I say that I felt that my depression, amongst many other conditions, one of the root causes was my own self-centeredness, is because classical teachings do talk about self-centeredness as being the cause for actually all our problems. Definitely self-grasping. Within the two types of ignorance of karma and ignorance of ultimate reality, it is said the ignorance of ultimate reality is the cause, the ultimate cause of all our sufferings in samsara. Yeah? So one begins to see a little bit of a correlationship there. Yes, if my self-centeredness arises from ignorance, then yes, indeed, my self-centeredness, and if ignorance, grasping to the self, and grasping to the self, which produces then that sense of me, the strong sense of me, is the cause of my problems, yes, indeed, the moment that I start to loosen that grip of the self by imagining taking in the suffering of others, just by the virtue of imagining to care for others, imagining to give others happiness and joy, even imagining that seems to loosen the grip of that strong sense of me. And as a consequence, as a result of loosening that grip on the strong sense of me, I feel lighter. I feel I can now function. I can get out of bed. So I'm bringing all of this into the equation here of how these are not mystical practices. Even doing it in a pretend way, simulation way, it seems to really have an effect. So now going back to the point here that if we can then begin to recognize, identify with the teachings saying that the main obstacle to developing bodhicitta, both bodhicittas, the conventional bodhicitta as well as the ultimate bodhicitta, is the self-grasping and the self-centeredness, then this text here is a method how to deal with self-centeredness and also the self-grasping. Verse by verse, the earlier verses. Which verse is it that it brings up? Yeah. Up until the 7th verse, it is a direct correlation. It is a direct antidote for overcoming the self-centeredness. The last verse, verse 8, is the verse where it tackles self-grasping. Yeah, self-grasping. So with that basis of understanding, then when we go through these verses, we can see how that is so, how that relate to. Yeah. So I think we'll have a break now. So we'll have a break for 10 minutes, and then I'll rush through these verses. And with the good basis we have had so far and where this all leading up to, then we can go through each verse and see like, oh, okay, I can relate to that. Yeah. Okay. So so 10 to 3, we'll come back again. Yeah. For those on Zoom. The text. Okay. Yes, I think so. I hope so. Yes. Do you hear me online? Yes. Okay, good. No, but it is, I think it's good to when the foundation is laid well, apparently the hardest work on any construction is the foundation, apparently. And if no good time is spent on the foundation, then the rest can crumble down very quickly. So I think what we've been doing so far is really trying to present what the foundation is. So with a limited time, of course, but so trying to get into the text then is that we talked about the 2 main obstacles. So this is a practice of mind training. What are we training for? What is this practice meant for? Meant to present the tools for developing bodhicitta. What is bodhicitta? We talked about it. There's 2 levels of bodhicitta. The main part we were talking about, developing love and compassion leading up to bodhicitta, was all on the conventional bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta requires really, that's a whole nother kind of nice, beautiful worms. but we will touch on it slightly later. Conventional bodhicitta, yes. Both are needed to be developed in order to achieve enlightenment. One cannot say, oh, cherry pick, saying like, no, I just like maybe the love and compassion part, but this pure intention part, the bodhicitta part, that seems a little too much for me. Well, then sorry, enlightenment is not possible. Yeah. So if we do want enlightenment, not only for ourselves, for the sake of all sentient beings, there's no other way than to develop bodhicitta. What kind of bodhicitta? How many levels of bodhicitta are there? Well, 2. Conventional bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta. The first part of the text will be focusing on conventional bodhicitta, yeah, in relation with the 6 perfections. And the last verse will be dealing on the ultimate bodhicitta. So, in identifying the obstacles to developing bodhicitta, we name 2 main, well, to conventional bodhicitta, main one is the self-centeredness. For developing ultimate bodhicitta, the main obstacle is self-grasping. Yeah. Main, I say, because they're all related. They're all interrelated. So how do we overcome self-centeredness if we have a problem? Perhaps some are beyond it. Some maybe don't experience any self-centeredness, then that's fine. But if we are, if we find that there's something, preventing us from developing loving, unconditional love and compassion for others, and thus then finding that, it's hard to even grasp this idea of bodhicitta, even developing in my case, even developing a motivation, let alone actual developing bodhicitta, but even just as a motivation, just as an intention is so hard. Why? According to teachings, because of self-centeredness. So how do I overcome this self-centeredness? What does self-centeredness mean again? The main focus is on me. That is self-centeredness. If the main focus is on me rather than others, if we feel that, everything revolves around me, and then that is the obstacle. So how do we overcome that? How do we open our hearts more to include others in the equation, where we begin to genuinely think it's not all about me. There's others here too. And how do we deal with others? Yeah. And And according to the teachings, the stronger sense of self-centeredness, the self-identity and self-centeredness we have, the more prone, the more vulnerable we are to experiencing the hardships in relation with others. The reason why others' remarks affect us so much, it ruins our day, is to the degree of how much self-centeredness we have. Yeah. So thus, not only for the sake of others, but for the sake even for oneself. That's what the teachers say. It does us service to lessen our self-centeredness. It brings us more joy and happiness in our life. So if that is true, then why not try any means, any methods to lessen that self-centeredness? Yeah? So here, the ways to overcoming self-centeredness, which is the focus is oriented around me, my own interest, what is there in for me to overcome that self-obsession? The teachings here suggest to think about others, not only lightly, but to really begin to cherish others, to really begin to open your heart. And of course, this is a practice to develop bodhicitta. So it's really taking that wish, that altruistic wish to benefiting others to the really highest level. So let us not kid ourselves thinking like, oh, this is a practice that I will do easy, and it seems easy. No, it's not going to be easy. But is it worth getting familiar with it? Is it worth hearing about it? Well, why? It is worth. If it's going to help us ultimately too, why not? So here we are, listening, hearing about it, being introduced to these otherwise seemingly far-fetched, complex, noble ideals, which is bringing us to our level. So here, the first verse then opens with a determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings, which is the wish to achieve enlightenment, who excel even the wish-granting jewel. Who excels even the wish-granting jewel? All sentient beings. How could they be more precious than a wish-granting jewel? The mythological wish-granting jewel is a jewel which can fulfill all one's temporary gains and wishes. One will accumulate all wealth. But we've already discussed on Friday evening, most part of this today, and even yesterday, we already discussed that even having all the wealth in the world may not necessarily guarantee true happiness for oneself. Yeah? So all a wish-fulfilling jewel can do, or any amount of wealth, wish-fulfilling jewel here is used as a metaphor to mean wealth, possessions. With even all the possessions in the world, if it's not going to make us truly happy, then is it really that worthwhile? Where sentient beings are said to be the optimum way, optimum source of our happiness. Why? Because the more we practice the sixth level, the six perfections, the more we perfect them, the happier we will become. How do we practice these perfections? Not in relation to only ourselves. It's all about practicing with others. We cannot practice generosity if there's no one else to practice generosity with. How can we be generous? Well, we can begin to be generous to ourselves. I notice that I'm quite miserly with myself. Honestly, once in a while on my birthday, an exception. Oh, it's my birthday, I might as well treat myself to a nice meal, whatever. But otherwise, I'm quite miserly. Yeah, it's not a surprise I'm miserly with others. I'm miserly with myself. But the true practice of generosity is when you start being generous with others. And if there's no others to be generous with, how can we practice generosity? So that's why others are precious for our practice of generosity. Practice of ethics. What is the definition of ethics? Ethic means committing oneself from harming other beings. That's the basis of ethics. Making a commitment to ourselves from refraining to harm other sentient beings. That is the basis of the definition of ethics. So again, sentient beings, if you don't harm other beings, guess what? We will start to become more happier. We'll have less enemies. All the enemies we have in this life, according to karma, is because we have harmed them previously. No one could harm us if we haven't harmed others ourselves. Yeah? So by now practicing ethics of refraining to harm others, we get the benefit. We're the beneficiary. Yeah? So that's why sentient beings are so precious. Practice of patience. Yes, we have to be patient with ourselves. Yes, that's where we start. But then when we extend the patience beyond ourselves, then it is with others. And the real practice of the perfecting the practice of patience is in relation with others. Having already mastered patience with oneself, now one begins to practice patience with others. So others, therefore, are so precious, more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Practice, similarly, practice of joyous effort. Joyous effort here means being joyfully taking upon the hardships to work for other sentient beings. And the more we work for other sentient beings, even though it involves some hardship, we do it joyfully because we know that the return is incredible. What is the return of helping other sentient beings, benefiting other sentient beings? Happiness for oneself as a default. Yeah, so it's beneficial for oneself. Just in case people think like, oh, practicing being a bodhisattva sounds being like a martyr. I have to go out there and save all beings despite all the suffering that I have to experience. No, it's not about that. Yes, there's going to be some hardship. That's part of nature. Whether you help out sentient beings or not, we're going to be experiencing some hardship. Why? Because we're in samsara. But here, it's making the suffering worthwhile. When you help others, put some effort in helping others, it's going to cost some effort, but we do it joyfully. And then the returns is happiness. So that's why other sentient beings are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Same with concentration. We develop our concentration with inspiration to benefit other sentient beings. We develop our wisdom with inspiration to benefit other sentient beings. That's why other sentient beings are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. More precious than that biggest diamond. What is the biggest diamond here? The Kohinoor or something, the diamond of the queen's crown, whatever. Anyway, even if we possess that, other sentient beings would be more precious than that. Yeah. So that's the first verse in a summary. So may at all times hold them dear means just as we would hold our possessions, a prized possession, whatever it may be, Ming-vas or some antique, whatever one's grandfather's watch or whatever it may be, just as we will hold that precious and, we hold it dear, here, sentient beings being really extremely precious, the ultimate source, the ultimate source of happiness, therefore very precious, hold them dear. Yeah, hold others dear. It makes sense, doesn't it, when we put it in a logical way? Does it make sense or not? Okay, I don't see much reaction. I wonder if it's getting through. Okay, so that's the first verse. Following along, that's perhaps a little bit hard enough, but then as the verses progress, we would find that it progressively becomes harder and harder to practice. Yeah, but all in mind again that it is ultimately for the benefit of oneself. So therefore, the second verse, whenever I associate with others, may I think myself as the lowest of all. This is a big one, huh? And from the depths of my heart, hold them others supreme. So this can be, again, as like with so many other teachings, this could be completely misunderstood as well. Does that mean then one has to be like, one has to be like a carpet and like let others trot along you and one lowest of all, one should not, develop one's self-esteem and confidence? No, not far from that. It's saying, again, it is only to the degree of how much emphasis do we put on ourselves and how much harm it has brought ourselves so far. If it is true, if it is true that being self-centered and grasping to the self is the cause of all one's problems, then doesn't it make sense then to loosen that sense of importance of me? And as His Holiness Dalai would say, as important as we feel we are, which we are important, but if we think we're the most important, even though we don't go on and claiming it, if we act as if we're the most important, we're just one. Other sentient beings are vast. Others are vast. Why do we have this presumption that I'm the most important when one is only one person, whereas others are so many? Yeah. So therefore, holding others supreme is that it's contradicting mainly the sense of the false pride. If we have a false pride based on our self-centeredness, if we have a false pride that I know quite a bit, I'm more important than others, this verse is particularly to overcome that false pride, the false ego of thinking that one is supreme. Actually, one is just one person. Others are more supreme. Yeah. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama mentions, with the equation, just imagine that we are neutral here. Here's a group of many other people, beings. Like, for example, we're in an isolated, suddenly we find ourselves in an isolated place. But here's a group of many people, whereas here's no one else. Or actually just one person. That one person is ourselves. But in an isolated place where you don't know anyone, you don't know how things work and everything, would you just go to that isolated place just by being yourself and then not being able to work out things and being completely left alone? Or would you want to mingle with others who know the ropes and can help you out and so forth, right? Naturally, we would choose the group where there's more. So therefore, as His Holiness says, it's more logical to think about others rather than just having the whole focus just on oneself, one's own happiness. And ironically, the more we focus on our own happiness, the less happy we are. I've experienced myself with depression. Yeah, the more I focus on myself, the less happy I am. The more I open myself, the more I share with others, the more joyful I am. Yeah. So therefore, hold others as supreme is in that context. It doesn't mean that we should suddenly thinking ourselves as being insignificant, being no one. Not like that, not in a neurotic way, but in a more healthy approach, in a realistic approach. So then in verse 3 is, in all actions may I examine my mind. And as soon as delusions or afflictions arise, endangering myself and others, may I firmly face and avert them. So because of the basis we spent so much time earlier and with my own examples of how the afflictions harm oneself, here this is will start to make more sense. It's quite logical. In all actions, whatever I'm doing, I examine my mind. Why? Because the afflictions arise from the mind. As contrary to thinking that the harm doers are out there, all my problems are, when the world is fixed, then I would have no problem. That's how we normally, even though we may not say that, that's how we sort of like react. That's our feelings, But here it is saying, no, all our problems come from our own mind, afflicted mind, the afflictions in the mind. So therefore, if that is true, if we begin to get a sense that that could be true, then what is being suggested here in this verse is that, yes, okay, if that is true, if I believe that is true, or if I start to think that that might be true, then what could I do about it? Well, in all my actions, whatever I do, all actions mean here, the Tibetans, again, the Buddhist tradition has this very neat way of packaging things. All our actions can become subsumed into three main actions. The actions of our body, which is more obvious, relatable. Actions of our speech, which is also relatable. But more important, actions of our mind. The thoughts in our mind. Intentions we have in our mind. Those are also actions. We are actively, it's become so habitual and so spontaneous, it may seem as if we have no control. It seems as if we're not initiating it. It seems like it's coming out of nowhere. But no, it is the mind which created that. All our afflictions created by our own ignorance in our own mind. So therefore here, when we take a courageous step to really choose to analyze our mind, check our mind. What is our mind up to? What kind of schemes is one's mind up to? What is my mind planning to do? If I claim that I'm loving someone, what is actually happening here? Do I really love them? How much is it about them and how much is about me? Yeah, this is how we examine our mind. It can be difficult, very challenging, but again, very rewarding. Because if it is a delusion which is predominant, if it is a delusion or affliction that is motivating us to do something, the outcomes will be always the same, the undesirable outcomes. Something which will hinder our own well-being and happiness. And by default, as we harm ourselves, because we have many others who are concerned about us, we think that, as long as I don't hurt others, I can do whatever I like. But that's not true. When we harm ourselves, it affects others, our loved ones. So therefore, the delusions, the afflictions, harm oneself directly and also harms others as well. So therefore, endangering myself and others, may I firmly face and avert them, meaning that may I begin to recognize them. The recognizing is the first step, apparently. It's a big step to even recognize, to admit to oneself. We begin by admitting it to ourselves. Yes, this is anger. What I'm experiencing right now is anger. I am angry. We might not readily admit it to others, but if we can't admit it to ourselves, then there's no chance even to admitting to others. So we begin by admitting it to ourselves. Yes, the teaching says this is anger. I can identify it. And anger can be so subtle. Yeah, there's many levels of anger. That's why there's more classifications. All the classifications of afflictions in Buddhist teachings is said to arise from the 3 root poisons. Yeah, from ignorance initially, then from attachment. A lot of the classifications of the delusions are derivatives of either anger or attachment. So, so that is verse 3. Then verse 4 is where, when I see beings of wicked nature, or someone just brought up again. Donna brought up earlier that he's a little uncomfortable with this translation of wicked. But what it means is when others, when we encounter others who seem to be spontaneously saying things which are hurtful to others, to ourselves and others, spontaneously doing things. When we encounter people who seem to be narcissists, narcissists, and then we immediately can say like, I'm not going nothing to do with them, but they should be condemned by every means because they're a narcissist. So of course we should condemn them, But when we do encounter, which we will, overwhelmed by violent virtue, non-virtue and afflictions, when we see others who are afflicted, the translation here use wicked, but whatever translation we use, when we see someone who of what we would call, not very good standing, who seem to be, we would call a narcissist, or a psychopath or murderer or whatever wicked nature we might, the society claims that others are condemned, can be condemned. We are judging by their actions, of course. Their actions, which we see, obviously, are the physical actions. Of course, in a murderer, that they did murder someone, yes. And then we judge by their verbal actions. And those negative actions, either physical or verbal negative actions that they have committed, was committed none other than because of the afflictions in their mind. They were afflicted by that, they were controlled by the afflictions. And so when we begin to understand that first in ourselves, first we need to find, because where does self-blame come from? The self-blame comes from really believing that, I'm not good for anything. I keep making the same mistakes again and again. I did this in the past. I did that in the past. I made so many mistakes. And we feel valid. It feel valid that we should blame ourselves, and the guilt trip and all of that arise. So I've kind of like worked a lot on trying to figure it out, and I'm in the process of trying to figure it out. But I realized that I've come to understand that the reason why we blame ourselves for anything wrong that we have done is because we identify ourselves with the affliction that took place at that time. When the affliction is so strong, it is as if part of ourselves, part of our identity merges with that. So therefore, we say, I'm an angry person. I am angry, as if anger is part of our identity. And I say, I am greedy. I did what I did because I was too greedy. I did what I did because I just lost it. I just became so angry. And we think like, and then we feel very guilty about it. According to Buddhist teachings, yes, we did something wrong. It is regrettable, but guilt is a whole nother thing. Guilt is well, as I've understood it, is more ego-based. We feel bad. We don't want to feel bad, but we keep feeling bad about it. And we're caught in this cycle of, I don't want to feel bad. It feels uncomfortable, but I am bad because I did this, I did that, So that's, as I understand it, more the guilt trip. Whereas the Buddhist teachings about regret is just acknowledgement. Yes, I did something wrong. Am I to be blamed for that? Ultimately, who is to be blamed is the afflictions. If I didn't have ignorance, if I knew better, I wouldn't have said the things I did. If I knew better, I would not have exploded. I was so conditioned by my past imprints, and I was so conditioned by my misconceptions that yes, I did become angry. I was greedy, but it is as if I had no choice because I was afflicted by the ignorance. And if we can begin to recognize that with ourselves, we would start to become more gentle with ourselves. We'd begin to see that, yes, well, unfortunately, I did those things which are out of ignorance, but ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance, just because we did something unknowingly, unfortunately, doesn't mean that there's no consequences. Many people think that if you don't believe in karma, you might not create negative karma. Huh? No, it's the opposite. If you don't believe in karma, you create even more negative karma because you think anything goes, anything is fine. You can murder someone, there's no consequences. As long as no one else finds out, if you can get away with murder, great. But because of karma, no. Perhaps not in this life, maybe perhaps not immediately. That's where karma is difficult. But when the consequences are not immediate, we don't see the connection. It's hard to put the dots together. But according to the teachings of karma, inevitably, unfailingly, the only exception is that if you purify. So with regret, what regret does in the Buddhist concepts is that we acknowledge, yes, it has been a mistake, but just acknowledging and saying that was a mistake and then brushing aside and letting it go is not sufficient if one doesn't want to experience the consequences. One has to actually do some counteractive measures to, as Buddhist teachings explain, purify the negative karma. So if we begin to understand that in ourselves on a profound level, then as we develop more sympathy and more compassion towards ourselves, with that understanding, we can then inevitably begin to acknowledge and accept others too. Others, no matter how evil they may seem to be, are afflicted by their afflictions. So that is what is, they were under the influence of the afflictions to do the wrong deed. So by understanding that, we can then still hold them dear, still have room for compassion, even more room for compassion. Our compassion, the teachings explain that one begins to really see the nature of samsara and what is causing ourselves and others suffering. The compassion for oneself becomes renunciation. The compassion for others becomes what we in Buddhist terms calls the compassion of wishing others to be free from suffering. Yeah. So thus holding them dear as they found a rare precious treasure. And in relation to oneself, why are they a treasure then again? Because in relation to oneself, when someone is under the influence of the afflictions, that is when they're going to start criticizing us. That is when they're going to start abusing us and so forth. But if we are determined to embark on the spiritual journey of following the bodhisattva path, leading to enlightenment, then we need to be working on why am I experiencing the concept? Why do I feel hurt when the others are criticizing me? Why do I have these buttons of feeling hurt? Because I created the causes myself. This is to help us to protect one from self-righteousness. If we think we're enlightened, spend a week with your parents, right? But that's just a metaphor. It could be anyone who pushes your buttons at any time. So when others criticize us, if we get affected, that is a reminder. Oh, I still have work to do. I still need more. There's more work. I still need to develop more patience because I'm being affected. I'm reacting to their criticism. So they become a teacher to point out that there's more work to be done. So that is why they are precious. When others out of wickedness, so may I hold them dear as if I found a rare and precious treasure. Yeah, that is how the others become a treasure, as being a real, invaluable point reminder. The Dharma is said to be like the Dharma and others others who criticize us and abuse us, slander us, or whatever harm, are mirrors to point out the work that we still need to do, that's kind of like strong, hidden sort of agendas we still have ourselves. Verse 5, when others out of envy treat me badly, we can see how progressively it gets harder and harder now. When others out of envy treat me badly with slander, abuse, and the like, may I take the defeat and offer the victory to them. We could spend the whole afternoon on that one. Yes, so what does it mean to take defeat and offer the victory to them? Yes, again, we're now spending time to cover this, but if we had time, I was going to share like two, and I do recite these verses every day and as part of my practice. How many times have I had to actually put it into practice? I'll be embarrassed to say so, but nevertheless, two specific times this particular verse came into mind where I felt completely validated and justified to become angry and upset with a situation. Somehow this verse came to my mind, and I just somehow allowed me to let go and offer the other the victory. And in both instances, I was on the verge of exploding. I was on the verge of becoming enraged because the situation seemed to deem that it was completely unjustified that the others were doing what they were doing. But on two occasions, I thought of this verse and somehow, and this is where I call it a blessing because it's not my normal self. If I were to practice this every time, I wouldn't have any problems, issues with my mom, right? So this is a proof that the fact that I'm having issues with my mom means that I'm not able to practice all the time. But on the occasions I did practice it, because it seemingly came out of the blue. Of course, I'd memorized these verses, but I don't remember them all the time. But that particular two instances, when I remembered the verse and was able to offer the practice, I consider it as a real blessing. Because it's good for us to know, those who are already familiar with the Buddhist teachings, and particularly Tibetan Buddhist teachings, the concept of blessing, the term blessing, as the teachers have described, is not like a mystical, miraculous thing happening there, but it is said that it is actually the word blessing in Tibetan means transforming of the mind. From a negative state of mind, when it transforms into a positive state of mind, that is considered a blessing. But for us to be able to do that comes from the grace of the teachers, the teachings. So the teachers and the teachings are a blessing, are indirectly blessing us to remember these verses and practice them in the appropriate times. When we're able to do so, that's a blessing. That's a blessing. So thus, I took it as a blessing at that time. But here, if we don't understand it in its proper context, it means like, oh, again, I have to accept all defeat. And when even, does that mean I have to, I cannot justify things when others do wrong? This is in relation to oneself. It's not in the general context, by the way, for example. And in relation to oneself, if it is a situation where it's a one-off incident where someone is, seemingly unbiasedly criticizing whatever, if one can, in this moment, then think like, okay, just let it be. It's not true, but just let it be. In willingly accepting to offer the victory to other, who is the real winner? Oneself. One does not become upset. One does not become angry. One maintains one's sanity. That is the victory for oneself. And offering the small victory of the spot of in my case, it was a parking spot, by the way, one of them. So actually, it's very interesting. By offering the parking spot to them, they actually honked their horn very loud and just drove off. I actually got the parking spot. Only when I was willing to offer to the other. But if I was willing to stand my ground, we would have got into an argument. He was like really, I could see on his face, he was furious. And I was upset too, but I thought, I wasn't wearing my robes, so I could have an argument with him without defaming the Sangha. But I thought, oh, he's really angry. If we fight over this, it's going to be nasty. Yeah. So I just offered the spot to him, but he drove off. The first victory was that I got this parking spot. The main victory was I didn't lose my cool. I actually, if he had taken the spot, I wouldn't have been upset because I was prepared. I was not pretending to offer him the spot. I was willing. I was just willing to find another spot. But, and then here, I like to share this story because for me, it was two things. If I was wearing my robes, would I even thought of making a scene and arguing with him? No. Why? Because I was wearing the robes and it would have been defamed the Sangha. So I wouldn't want to have a bad name for the Sangha. But I would have not really taken that into heart. I would have begrudgingly offered this victory to them. I would have said, okay, take the spot. I don't want to get in a fight because I'm a Buddhist monk here and I don't want to defame the Buddhist Sangha. Inside, I would have been holding on, still feeling miserable myself. But because I actually genuinely offered them the victory, I got that sense of like peace in myself. So one thing I learned was the robes are important. It does protect you. But more important than the robes is the Dharma. This is the real protection. Amongst the three objects of refuge, for those who are Buddhist, we have heard again and again, the real object of refuge is the Dharma. At that moment, the Dharma protected me, not the robes. I wasn't wearing the robes. I could have got away with it. But because I remembered the Dharma, in that instant, it protected me. Yeah. So, yes, this is an outer protection. The robes are an outer protection. The vows are an outer protection. When one really understands what the vows are all about, what the Dharma is all about, we get an inner protection, regardless of whether we're wearing robes or not. Yeah. So that's the main lesson I learned then. I'm glad I got that out of my chest. So that was verse 5. Verse 6, when someone whom I've benefited, now it becomes even more challenging. Not just any random person on the street fighting for a parking spot, but someone really close. As close as your own children, that you have invested all your time and energy bringing up, giving them an education, and all of that. You're someone very dear to you, been a very good friend, a loyal friend for 20 years, and you put all your time and energy to be friendly with them. Any example we use here, and someone whom I benefited, not just a random person, benefited, and in whom I placed great hope. You had great hopes for them. You really thought that they will come through. You have been loyal to them, you think they will be loyal to you in a partner's relationship. Great hopes. Inflicts me with extreme bad harm, in whatever harm that may be. When they do so, may I hold them as a supreme spiritual friend. And some translations use teacher, spiritual teacher. So indeed, here, this is taking it to a whole nother level of when we seem like, that is where it is most hurtful. That is why we have the most conflicts with the dear ones, because we feel that they should understand. You know, one's parents should understand where we're coming from. Our partners should understand us. We've lived together. They know us better than anyone. Why can't they read my mind, know what I want, know what I'm talking about? What are my desires? So we feel like that's why we get so frustrated. We get the most frustrated when it is someone who's close, who we believe that should understand us, or do understand us. We believe we had high hopes. And that's why it's very hurtful, because it's very close. So therefore, the closest ones can inflict the most harm to us, but by default, then they become the best teachers, the greatest teachers. So then verse 7, in short, may I directly and indirectly offer my benefit. So if this is all true, and if I truly hold others dear and wish them well, wish them to be happy, then may I directly and indirectly offer benefit and happiness to all my mothers. May I secretly take upon myself on all harm and suffering of my mothers. So this is where the sequence, that 7 cause and effect sequence of developing bodhicitta is presented here. If one has practiced that sequence of developing bodhicitta, then one who has been familiar with not only the concept, but one has developed it to a point where one is now genuinely seeing all beings as being like one's mother and wishes to repay the kindness of all beings as one would wish to repay the kindness of one's mother. And therefore, may I take upon their sufferings and offer them all my joy and happiness. The practice of Tonglen in Tibetan, the practice of giving and taking. Giving one's happiness, taking upon the suffering of others. Yeah. secretly. One doesn't want to announce that. Keep modest in one's normal reactions. Keep modest, but in one's practice, be courageous in taking upon the suffering of others. And am I allowed to go a little over time? For those on Zoom, are you okay with it? Do you see reactions? Okay, just to wrap up, just a few extra minutes. I know, if anyone has to rush off, by the way, on Zoom or here, please, you'll not be disrespectful. I give you permission to leave the room. But if you have the time, I have the time, then let us just wrap it up. So I want to demystify this seemingly mystical practice and what is known as, in a traditional way, as a secret practice, because it's not an easy practice to take upon the suffering upon oneself and give this happiness to others. I want to demystify it in saying that actually, unbeknownst to us, each and every one of us on Zoom here, everyone in the room, including myself, unbeknownst to us, we have been putting this into practice in small ways, but we all begin with small ways. So what does the Tonglen practice of Tonglen giving and taking really mean? I'll give some examples that you would immediately relate to. Let's say we're traveling on public transport, a bus or tram, and it's quite crowded. And of course, this example would work very well in India. All the buses and trains are crowded there. And you initially have been anxious whether you'll find a seat or not. You kind of rush in, like in India, you rush in to get your seat in the bus or the train. You come in and you find a spot. Found a spot. You're so glad, you're happy. And then soon after, all the seats are taken. Soon after that, someone walks in, a feeble person, either feeble because of their age or because of some ailment, or a mother with a small child and a baby walks in, and you immediately have this reaction, oh, please come, have a seat. You offer your seat to them. And you stand up, and you're willing to stand up for the rest of the journey, however long it takes. In India, it could be sometimes a few hours. Yeah? Everyone has done that, given up their seat for someone else. Another example, you're in line in the grocery store or the bank, quite long line. And of course, you're initially frustrated, oh, there's a long line. When you see someone else coming and they're like really frustrated, and then they sort of can anyone spare giving me their spot because they're really rushed because they have to get to whatever, a late appointment or whatever it may be. And suddenly you think like, oh, well, actually I have more time than they do. They're in a great rush, and you willingly offer your spot to them in the grocery line or a bank, wherever. We've all done that, right? And we can have many more examples. In that moment, we were practicing Tonglen, willingly taking a little discomfort of having to stand up, willingly giving our nice spot to someone else to sit down and enjoy a nice seat. And of course, when they're appreciative and thank us profusely, oh, thank you so much, we feel a little bit self-righteous, but we feel good. You feel good, like, yeah, we don't mind standing up, especially when they're so appreciative. It's a small deed we've done, but we feel grateful about it. Tonglen practice is that's what it is. It's taken to a whole nother scale, whole nother level. But it is nothing more than that. So we all have practiced Tonglen within our capacity. And so here the Buddhist teachings are presenting a means of going further. Be courageous to take, not only offer your seat on the bus or the tram, but be courageous. Of course, the perfect example of Tonglen is for mothers. I'm sure there's many mothers here. Willingly sacrificing their night's sleep to tend to their newborn baby. How many nights have you lost sleep willingly, joyfully, to take care of your child? Yeah, that is Tonglen practice. At most Tonglen practice in a conventional way, in a worldly sense. That is why mothers are so precious. They're willingly sacrificing their time, their good, well, what seems like a sacrifice, big sacrifice has a big connotation. Joyfully, they do it joyfully, with joyous effort. So Tonglen practice, I like to demystify it in saying that we all have the capacity. And the Buddhist practice, in order to become a bodhisattva, it is said that we take that practice even further. We're willing to take upon not only immediate small sufferings, but greater sufferings, all sufferings. But does that mean that we need to suffer because we're taking their suffering, we need to suffer ourselves because of that? No, in fact, that suffering we take in with a specific practice is that we destroy the very cause of our own suffering, which is the self-cherishing mind, the self-centered mind, and self-grasping. That is destroyed by taking in. So there's no loss here, only gain for both. It's a win-win situation. Of course, by imagining to take suffering doesn't mean it really lessens the others. Some cases, we hear stories of great masters actually taking upon suffering of others, alleviating the suffering of others. I know some healers say that they take upon bad negative energy, but then if it's not done skillfully, then it could be detrimental to one's own well-being and health. So then that's where the wisdom comes in. Verse 8. May all this remain undefiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concepts, 8 worldly concerns that we touched upon yesterday. And may I, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, be released from the bondage of attachment. Again, this point, if there's time, that's why this condensed teaching can be extended out to many days, because this is, the verse 8 is only the one verse where it just touches upon the conventional bodhicitta. So the conventional bodhicitta, what does it mean? It really means by seeing everything, by understanding that things are not what they seem to be, by understanding the ultimate nature of things, seeing that all relative things, all conventional things that appear to us is like an illusion. Because what self-grasping does is that it gives us, it brings in what the ignorance of self-grasping taints our perceptions, corrupts our perceptions to see things as having a solid identity. A solid identity. Yeah. So therefore, first of all, I like to do this exercise. Everyone here who's not new to Buddhism would have heard emptiness, right? So very briefly, is everything empty? Are all things empty, including oneself? What's the answer? Answer is what? So if you're nodding, saying, yes, everything is empty, what are things empty of? What are? Inherent nature, exactly. The first trap the first misconception with this teaching of emptiness is that people take the wrong turn and think that, oh, Buddhism talks about emptiness. So if everything's empty, then that sounds like nihilism. And indeed, if it is not explained and understood properly, it may sound like nihilism. And it would be nihilism if the Buddhist teachings are presenting everything being empty of existence. So things are not empty of existence. If things were empty of existence, then nothing would exist. Things are empty, yes. Are they empty of existence? No. Things do exist. So what are things empty of? Empty of inherent existence. That is the key point. So here, of course, when we have more time, if things were to exist inherently, how would they exist? If things were not empty of inherent existence, if things were inherently existent, how would they exist? Self-sufficiently, without depending on any causes and conditions. So is there anything in the universe which exists autonomously by itself without depending on any other factors, any other cause and conditions? Logically, what would you think? I mean, it's a very subtle topic, so it brings up a lot of. But according to Buddhist teaching, no, nothing. There's nothing which exists autonomously from its own side, which means without depending on any other causes and conditions. Nothing at all. Turning back to personally, unbeknownst to us, we have this wrong conception. We have this wrong view of that there's this identity of me, which is a very solid. When at the core of our existence, we believe that there's this me which is beyond our body and mind. There's this like me, which is like really there. When I'm hurt, it's this true me, this me that is really strongly, solidly existing there. And that's we feel we have to defend this me, this I, which exists. solidly and substantially, autonomously. But that's all an illusion. That's all an illusion, apparently, according to the teachings. I can say this passionately because I've heard it many times, and I trust the Dalai Lama and other teachers that this is true. Have I realized it? No, but I'd like to work towards understanding this, realizing this, not just intellectually, but experientially. And that is what the teachings are saying, is that if as the teachings say that, well, the teachings say that since the misconception of the self, which produces that grasping to the self, is the root of all our problems, the only antidote, the ultimate antidote for overcoming that, overcoming that grasping to the self is by realizing that there is no such self that we're grasping onto. Why? Because the self that we're grasping onto is a false self. It's a self that seemingly we believe exists autonomously, independently, not related to anything else. Such a self does not exist. The self is empty of an inherently, substantially, autonomously existing nature. How does the self exist then? The self exists, yes, it exists in dependence, in relation to the body, to the five aggregates of the body, and then the mind. Can we separate the self with the body and mind? Ultimately, no. Well, we talk about the gross body. The gross body we leave behind, but there's a subtle body. The mind, the identity of self, me, is always interrelated with the body and mind. And ultimately, the ultimate dependence is said to be on a label. That is much more subtle, and that will require much more explanation. But as far as that the self, the identity, the sense of me is not in a solid, separate, solid, and autonomous entity, is that fact that the self is empty of an inherent existing self. We are empty of an inherent existent self. Everything is empty of an inherently existent nature, self. That is the view of emptiness in a nutshell. And so, ultimately, when we realize that there's no autonomously, inherently existent nature of things, there's no ultimately, inherently bad or good or anything. So when one truly understands and experiences that, apparently, according to teachings, okay, I say this much to wrap up, that according to the Buddhist teachings, the great masters have said from the Buddhist teachings that when we begin to even have a doubt of what emptiness is all about, even when we begin to have a doubt about it, it begins to shatter our samsaric existence. Because it is the strong belief, the strong misconception we've held on for lifetimes. And in this life, until we heard the Buddhist teachings, we would have just continuously just went on with life thinking like, yeah, me, I exist. Of course, I have a solid identity. We don't say that, but that's the belief we have. The cup has a solid identity. There's the cup. We talk about looking for the cup. Can you find the cup for me, please? Here it is. Here, I found a cup for you. And we think, oh, thank you very much. You found a cup for me. But Buddhist teaching is saying, and we believe, wait, that's a conventional level. Yes, this is the cup. It has a lid. Conventionally, that's acceptable. But is there really a cup there as we perceive it? Where is the cup really? So thus, when we really search for the cup and we don't find it, as one of the Buddhist quotes say, the not finding of an inherently existent cup, the not finding of the inherently existent self is the ultimate finding of the self, the ultimate finding of the cup. Yeah? So that's a good koan or whatever to remember, the not finding of the inherently existent cup, the not finding of the inherently existent me, and thus one's partner, son, children, father, mother, everything. Even enlightenment doesn't exist inherently. Even emptiness itself doesn't exist inherently. Yeah? There's nothing which exists inherently. Finding that, discovering that, initially intellectually, conceptually, then experientially, It's what is going to free us from this bondage of being in samsara, the bondage of suffering. And thus, when we truly understand that, then our compassion for ourselves and other beings reaches a whole other level, because now we're not only wishing to be free others, ourselves and others from suffering, but we have found the method, the means. And that means, the method of freeing ourselves and others from all suffering is the ultimate bodhicitta. Does it make some sense? Okay. I've finished now. I promise you, I've done. But I will, if you have time, again, for those who need to leave, please do so. Those on Zoom, please leave. We are finishing the session. You can do a dedication for yourself. But for those who have time and would like to have some questions, I'm happy to be here for that. Again, but first, let me get permission, because this is not my space. It's not on my terms. Would that be okay, Venerable? Or do we need to logistic? Okay, that's what you need to find out. So there's a puja at 4. So bring your questions to the next teacher. I've opened a can of worms. Bring that to the next teacher. Take notes and bring it to the next teacher. So we have time at least to do a short dedication, right? Okay. Yeah. So here we are. We have spent a significant time today. So I know I can get, quite animated and overly excited about all of this. So please do excuse me, but nevertheless, hopefully it has, resonated some points at least. And many of these points are very, very deep and subtle, so it takes us a long time to unravel and to fully understand. But nevertheless, for us to have willingly spent time together and put this energy in having these sessions, we have definitely created some positive merit. So let us dedicate this merit. As someone once pointed out, and I've never failed to remember that analogy. It's like if people have worked on this computer, you work a long time, many hours, you could lose all your work, which is so devastating. So the teachings say that if we don't dedicate our merits, the moment we get angry, we will lose a big portion of that good merit. So before something pushes our buttons and we get angry, let us dedicate this merit. So we dedicate it to the optimum way that, just as with our motivation, may the positive merit we have accumulated together become a cause for each and every one of us, and each and every one of us, to continuously, follow the path of righteousness in whatever way one understands it. For us Buddhists, then may we follow the path leading to liberation and enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And through our merit, then also furthermore, may our precious teachers, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all other teachers from every tradition, have a long life. May their wishes, and their wishes are only wishes to benefit other sentient beings, may all their wishes be fulfilled without any obstacles. May the reincarnation of our precious masters who passed away, Kapche Lama Sopo Rinpoche, Ganden-Tri Rinpoche, and all other precious teachers from all lineages, may they swiftly return again to be able to continue to benefit ourselves and other sentient beings. So with that dedication in our mind, then let us come out of this short dedication and hopefully take the positive energy for the rest of the evening and for our lives to come. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Oh, just quickly, one of the works on for bodhicitta is the famous work by Shantideva, the Bodhisattva Chittaya, or the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. I just discovered this book in Geshe-la's house recently, The Beautiful Way of Life, which is by Reni Fusui, and he puts it in very nice language, the whole Bodhisattva Vichara, in verse form, but in very easily understandable, relatable verses, so it's a nice a very inspiring, nice book that I could just recommend to everyone as well. So, yeah, with that, we'll have to conclude.
Thank you, Venerable.
Sure.
We hope that you can come back again, that your depth of honesty in regard to examples from your own life,
Mhm.
I think help make the Dharma and the teachings more accessible to all of us. So we appreciate your time this weekend and we look forward to having you back someday. And
Okay.
maybe you'll bring your mother.
I know that might be more difficult, but yeah, it can always be another opportunity. Thank you very much, everyone, for being so patient with me. Thank you.